So first, I just want to say thank you so much for this opportunity. My name is Rosemary Meredith. I work in the Office of Disability Access at the University of North Texas. I've joined UNT almost 2 years ago, but my experience of working in disability services ranges 25, 26 years now. So it's a pleasure to join you here today to talk a little bit about general strategies and techniques and what usually students need to do if they want to seek accommodations. Also with me today in this presentation, I have my colleagues from TRIO here at UNT, so I'll let them introduce themselves if they don't mind.
Hi, everyone. My name is Anthony. I'm the Assistant Director here at TRIO Student Support Services, and I'll be, along with Deetra, and I'll let her introduce herself. We'll be conducting our part of the presentation later on.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having us today. I'm Deetra Craig. I'm Director for TRIO Student Support Services, and I work there with Anthony and with Rosemary. So again, thank you so much for having us.
So first I thought we would start off talking about the mission of what I do, what we specifically do in the Office of Disability Access. I know a lot of folks initially, when we talk about disability, have a lot of questions about what does this office do and why does it exist, and what is our function, and particularly for students that might be transitioning from the high school environment to the collegiate environment, what does that look like? So the goal of a disability services office. Now, I just put general on the slide, disability services, because depending on the institution where your son or daughter or where they choose to attend, the office might be called different things. At UNT, it's called the Office of Disability Access. I happen to know from previous experience in working at different colleges, it might be called accessibility services or disability services. But regardless of what they're called, the whole intent of providing the services is to help raise awareness about students with disabilities, to be that advocate. Up until now, if you've been a parent and I'm a child that has been receiving these type of services, and let me fully disclose, I'm a parent too, so I completely understand it through that lens. You've been a very strong advocate for your son or daughter up to this point. You've made sure that they've gotten the services they need, the accommodations they need, and you've connected with the school. And we're going to talk a little bit about how that shifts now in post-secondary. But our role here in the ODA or disability services is now to become that advocate for that student when they come into the collegiate setting. So it's to help raise awareness, not only with the student population, but also with the overall general campus community as a whole. We also want to be an access for students. And what that means is we have open door policies that all of my colleagues that work in disability services, we want the students to come in. We encourage them to make appointments, but we want the students to come in. If you need the help, please seek us out. Most college campuses will also have opportunities for students with disabilities to become engaged with the campus community in some way. At UNT, we have connect groups that we sponsor through our office. Depending on the nature of the disability. We have the Blind and Visually Impaired Alliance group. We have a connect group for students that are on the spectrum. We have connect groups for students that are deaf or hard of hearing, so they can connect with peers that have similar challenges just to help them navigate the collegiate experience. So that's what we offer at UNT, but I also want to give you an overview of what most disability services offices will, depending on their staffing and their availability. Nine times out of 10, they'll have the same type of services available. Ultimately, the reason why we exist is another question we get a lot of the time. Well, there are laws out there. Some of you parents might be very familiar with some of those laws and the guidance that we have to follow. I'll just briefly mention them here. There's the Rehab Act of 1973, and then most recently there's the Americans with Disabilities Act of 1990. The ADA is an extension, really, of the 504. The ADA took the premise of guaranteeing access for students into different realms. Title I being employment. Title II is what we're going to focus on when we talk about education, and the role of what education will do to ensure that your son or daughter or your child has access. But we also want to follow campus policies and city ordinances. So depending on where they might attend, that also leads into what we might do as well. And I can go into more particular questions about that if there are some at the end about why that's important. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to get too much into the legalese with that. So that's why I just want to give you a quick overview, but I can answer specific questions if you do have them. I'll be glad to do that. So when we talk about disability services, one of the first questions when I interact with students and I interact with parents, and having a child that just graduated from high school and was looking at different colleges, I know firsthand what this is like and what kind of questions you might have, and trying to look at it through a parental lens. And one of the big things I want you to know as a parent, if you have a son or daughter that is seeking academic accommodations on the collegiate level when they come to a university, the big difference here is going to be students must self-advocate. As I mentioned before, you've been a wonderful advocate without a doubt for them up until this point. But we can't speak to you. And I don't mean that to be rude, but unless the student signs a FERPA release or provides us some guidance, we cannot speak to you directly. So your role here is instrumental in encouraging them to be their own self-advocate and what that looks like. In post-secondary, we do not modify the curriculum that may have occurred in your high school environment. School students with disabilities are expected to adhere to the same policies, procedures, guidelines of every student on the college campus. If a professor has a 100-page paper that the student must write, then they must write a 100-page paper. Or if it's a multiple choice exam and it's 50 questions, the student needs to answer all 50 questions to the best of their ability. So we don't modify, but our role is to make sure that we're providing equal access. And that's how the roles and responsibilities may shift a little bit. So depending on the type of accommodations the student might have received in the 504 document or the ARD, might be some familiar terminology or IEP, it might change slightly depending on what the needs are that the student expresses when they meet with that disability services coordinator. So it really goes back to that self-advocacy piece as well. Excuse me. And another difference that I want to make you aware of is students with disabilities are integrated into the same classroom as all students. So if in the IEP or 504, students if there were language of self-contained or a resource room, that's not an accommodation that is provided at the post-secondary level. Now, we do have accommodations where students might request for a distraction-reduced testing environment, for example. That is an option on almost all campuses in some way or another, how it's fashioned. Here at UNT, we actually have a testing center here within our ODA center where students can request testing services and register. But that is one of the other distinct differences between the two different educational environments. So one of the things that, if you don't remember a whole lot, because I know we're going to be talking about a lot of information here, and I know it can be overwhelming, and you're hearing different terms like ARD, 504, ADA, all of this information. One of the big takeaways I want you to know, and I can't say this enough, is the self-advocacy piece. Okay, so students, when they come into the college campus, they must self-advocate for services. What does that mean? Well, I actually looked it up in the dictionary and I thought, I want to know how it's defined. So it means knowing your rights and responsibilities, speak up for your rights, and being able to make the choices and decisions that affect your life. Now, that's the Webster Dictionary definition. But what does that mean in terms of looking at it through an educational lens? Well, we want to make sure, and you want to make sure that you have perhaps role played. One of the things I would recommend is maybe role play with your son or daughter about what this looks like. Get used to students talking about their disability. If they're needing academic accommodations, we want students to tell us what they need. Now, I know, having worked in this field for many, many years, that's not an easy thing to ask a lot of students to do. So if students will just come to our door, if students will just email us, if they will just let us know that they need the help, then we can sit down with them and say, okay, let's talk about some of the challenges that you might have. I see that you have talked to me about what you experienced while you were attending Capel High School, for example. But let's talk a little bit about how you might have some of those challenges here now that you're a UNT student, for example. And we can listen and hear the student say, okay, what I'm hearing you say is you're having difficulty processing material. Right? You think maybe extra time might help with that? Do you think maybe if we get you a note taker for that class, that might help? And that's how we had that interactive collaboration with the student. So, but initially we cannot have that discussion unless the student lets us know that they need the help. So that's why self-advocacy is so, so, so important. Even if the student is, some students will come in and they'll be very comfortable talking about their disability. And some students won't. Some students will say, I don't want people to know I have a disability. Well, one of the things I want to let you know that our services are confidential. Okay, when students receive our services, and even when the professors are notified of the accommodations the students have been approved for, they're not told the nature of the disability. Okay, so that's very important for you to convey to them and why they need to self-advocate. Because if they don't come through our doors, if they don't contact us via email, by phone, or come, in this case, Sage Hall, where I'm located at UNT, we don't know to help. So that's key. So that's why I want to put the slide here. And I know that's really hard to do. Another thing that I would encourage you to do, some households are not used to using the word disability. Well, I will tell you, as a professional working in this field, and I don't mind disclosing this, I'm a person with a disability too, okay? I look at disability as a part of somebody. It doesn't define them. It's just part of who they are. So we use the word disability in higher education. We don't shy away from that terminology. So if you have a student that is unfamiliar or says, I don't want to talk about that word, have that discussion in your household. So when they come to the collegiate environment, they'll be a little bit more comfortable talking and advocating. That's another piece of advice I would give you as well. And I know I'm talking really fast, guys, and I don't mean to. It's just, I am so passionate and I love what I do. So please, if I am talking too fast, just tell me to slow down. I don't have my clock in front of me. I can't see it at the moment, but I want to give my colleagues enough time to talk about their areas as well. So when a student comes into our office and they say, I think I might need services, one of the things that we're going to ask them to do is part of that self-advocacy piece is understanding their disability too. So if a student says, I just have a disability and I need help because my mom told me to come here. Now, those type of statements do exist. We do get those. And we'll say, great, so glad to have you come in. But let's talk a little bit about that. I know your mom wanted you to come in, but let's talk a little bit about how your disability might impact you. So it's really empowering the student for them to talk about their disability. And one of the things that I typically do when I start the conversation is I will tell students, I know you just met me 5 minutes ago. Okay, so first I want to thank you for coming into my office. 2, I want you to know that everything you tell me is confidential. 3, I know it's hard to talk about what you may not be so good at. I know you might be perceiving this as a weakness, or you may be ashamed, or you may not want to talk about it. But this is a safe spot where there's no judgment. And I just want to figure out how to best help you so you can be successful and have equal access in your academic environment. So when you tell me that you have a learning disability and you have difficulty reading, tell me a little bit about what makes it difficult, what makes it challenging for you. Because by your answers and by the documentation that you provide, we can determine what type of academic accommodations we need to provide to you. So that's one of the things that I would encourage as well is when you're working with your student and about the self-advocacy piece, you might also want to work with them and talk about their disability, because in some situations you may have been such a great advocate. I've had students come into my office and say, I don't know what to say because my mom or my dad or my grandmother has always done this for me, but I just know I need to come in. So that's part of understanding the disability too. That's the expectation in post-secondary, that students will have that discussion in some way. Next slide. So I added this slide of time management in because a lot of times, whether a student has a documented disability or not, time management always seems to be an issue, right? And why is that? I think it's the adjustment. And I saw it firsthand. Full disclosure, I have children that are in Coppell ISD at the moment, and they're used to their AB schedule. And they're like, I know when my classes are. I go this class, this class, this class, this class. And so when they come into the collegiate environment, they no longer have that type of structure. It's very different. And some students transition well with it and some students struggle with it. And it doesn't matter if they're an A student when they were in high school or they were a D student in high school. All students struggle with this a little bit their first semester. So for those parents that are listening out there, I want you to know that is actually somewhat normal. And the reason why students will struggle sometimes is because they no longer have that AB schedule. They'll have classes on Monday, Wednesday, or they'll have classes on Tuesday, Thursday. And it might be an hour and 20-minute block. And because the classes only meet every 2 days, every 3 days, whatever it might be, excuse me, the amount of homework can be overwhelming at first. Because what's different is they don't see that same instructor every day. So that same instructor, think about it, when they're in high school, they're seeing that same instructor every day. So that instructor, or at least their AB schedule, is getting to know their habits, their behaviors, the way they need to adjust their lesson plan. And in the collegiate environment, your professor may know you very well, they may not. Okay, it just depends on how many students are in the class and how that professor has structured that classroom. So the responsibility is on the student to incorporate those time management skills often than not to help them manage it. So here are some tips. Anytime you incorporate something new, it takes about 3 weeks for it to become a habit. So I would tell students, practice, practice, practice. When you want to sit down and think about good time management skills, decide how you want to divide and conquer the amount of material that you need to do. But a lot of times for students to realize what they need to do, they need to say, okay, I'm looking at this document called a syllabus, and I just see I've got 4 papers, I've got a midterm, and I've got a final, and I might have a project in this class as well, and I don't even know where to start. So sometimes it's working with the students and saying, okay, this is what you have. So now let's figure out how we can make it manageable for you. And then let's put it in a planner. Now I'm showing my age here. My kids have told me this. Mom, I don't use a planner anymore. I use my phone. I told you I was a parent of a high school student. That's what I hear all the time. And I tell them, that's okay. If you don't use a planner, a traditional planner, then use your phone, but put it in the phone and use the phone. Put different sound alerts to let you know that something's coming up or something is due. What I typically ask students to do and advise them to do is, once you know everything that you need to do for that class, prioritize when things are due. And then if you've got a paper that's due on a Friday, don't wait till Thursday night to start writing. Back it up another week and start that brainstorming process and incorporating all the different strategies that you need to, and set an alarm for each of those tasks. Now, does ODA, Office of Disability Access, help students with this? It's up to the coordinator. We're not mandated. Our primary focus is to provide accommodations for students. But I mention this because a lot of times when students ask for certain accommodations, it's really not an accommodation they need. They just need help with time management. So we might refer students to other services on our campus. Here at UNT, it might be things such as TRIO, which my colleagues will talk about in a second, or it might be the UNT Learning Center that provides tutoring and academic coaching. But typically, regardless of if a student has a disability or not, the time management skill piece is vital for helping them transition into this new educational setting that they have. Anthony, I think that was the last slide for me, if I'm not mistaken. So I will hand it over to my colleagues now in TRIO.
Thanks, Rosemary. Again, my name is Anthony. Thanks for having us today. Myself and Deetra, we'll talk briefly about just one campus resource that Rosemary had mentioned here at UNT that can assist your students here at the university. We are TRIO Student Support Services. We are a federally funded program designed to serve first generation, low income, and students with disabilities here at the university. TRIO programs, specifically SSS programs, we can be found across various institutions across the state and the country, both at community or two-year colleges, as well as four-year universities. So not every school has this type of program or resource, but here at UNT, we do provide that. And so we just want to give you a brief overview of what we do and how we do it. So you'll see here on the screen our required services. We serve 268 students here at UNT, which is a very small number compared to the actual population of the university, which is I think roughly over 40,000. And so in my role as one of the advisors, I advise and assist students with course registration and selection. Here at the university, we provide economic and financial literacy, so managing money and funds. And of course, this also kind of ties into assistance with financial aid applications and scholarship applications. But then on the academic side, we also want to provide an extra layer of support in terms of tutoring for our students. So we do have tutoring as part of our program. And of course, we want to encourage our students to pursue graduate school or beyond the bachelor's degree attainment. So those are just our required services that we provide, required by the Department of Education. And so to Rosemary's point, as far as qualifying for our program. So when we say a documented disability, that means the student has to be registered with the school's ODA office or equivalent in order for us to prove that they do have a documented disability and for us to be able to serve them in our program. So that piece of advocacy and self-disclosure to register for services is super important. And so that way we can serve the student through our program. On the next slide, and Deetra, feel free to chime in if you like. We just want to include a snapshot of our flyer, again, just to illustrate the services that we provide. So here in our location in Chestnut Hall at UNT, we have a computer lab and a student lounge for students to get work done and socialize with other students in the program. Alongside tutoring, we call it educational mentoring. So we do have upperclassmen that work with our students to help them with tutoring, obviously academic support, but also to mentor them as a student. And it's easy for us as instructors or advisors to tell them what they need to do to be successful, but obviously having that peer support from another student tends to have a lot more impact. We want to help prepare them for careers and life beyond graduation, and so tying in graduate school and career preparation is also very important for us. And so we do, on our screen, we do have our requirements again for the program. So in addition to identifying as first generation college student, a low income, we do use information from the FAFSA to determine low income eligibility, and then of course documentation with the ODA office. Students do have to be admitted and currently registered at the university for us to provide that service and take them through our application process. So our application process is online, so we can definitely share this information as needed, and the link to our website and application. So it's completed online, and then since we're still working in the hybrid environment, we can meet on Zoom for appointments to help answer any questions, or in person here at the campus. Deetra, was there anything that you wanted to include?
Oh, Anthony, I think you covered it all. And I did also want to go back, like you said, with Rosemary and just highlight how we worked a lot with Rosemary and with the Office of Disability Access with our students. We share a lot of students, so we promote the same self-advocacy piece. We try to make sure that students are equipped with what they need to navigate the higher ed system, to navigate and find the resources that they need, but also, providing that, assistance as needed. And so we work hand in hand with Rosemary in her office quite a bit. So I just wanted to highlight that as well. But other than that, Anthony, you covered it all.
Yeah, thanks, teacher. And so, yeah, every university is going to look a little bit different. And so here at UNT, it is a very large campus. And so it is easy for students to feel lost or overwhelmed as an incoming freshman or even as a transfer student from a community college. And so we do see a lot of that difficulty at first, adjusting to a new school and a new environment, and then learning how to navigate that environment. And so that, again, that's what our job is, to help the students that seek out our services, because they are voluntary. We don't require or mandate anyone to use our program. But we encourage students that do come to UNT, if they qualify, to participate, because we do help them and navigate the university and get them connected with other resources. So myself, I attended here at UNT, and so it's changed and grown a lot since I was last a student. And so we want to make sure that we are supporting students of all eligibility criteria as best as we can. Our last slide, I believe, just has our contact information. So again, feel free to reach out to us for any questions or referrals as needed. And thank you for having us today.